Hello, everybody, and welcome to this OECD webinar with me, Duncan Crawford. Thank you so much for joining us. Today, we're discussing how artificial intelligence can support students with special education needs. Should AI be used in all cases? What kinds of AI tools are effective? Do they truly make a positive difference? And how can we ensure that AI is being used responsibly so that all students with special education needs benefit and some don't miss out? It's obviously a complex topic, but the OECD has released a paper recently about it entitled Leveraging Artificial Intelligence to Support Students with Special Education Needs, which has lots of insights and guidance on the subject. You can check out that report on our website, oecd.org. We are going to be discussing some of the key messages from that paper. We're going to have a panel discussion in a moment. But first up, the OECD's Director for Education and Skills, Andreas Schleicher, is going to make some opening remarks. Over to you, Andreas.
Yeah, thank you so much, Duncan. And I'm really excited to present this paper to you. It's AI for no group other than people with special needs has AI such a promise in putting them on the main stage. And it's never an automaticity. I think that's also very clear. You know, when you think about AI, it is not a magic power, more like an incredible amplifier and an accelerator. It can amplify good educational practice in the same way it can accelerate poor practice. It can foster inclusion and equity. I think that's its great promise, that it gives, students with special needs the possibilities they wouldn't have before. But we've also seen plenty of examples for how AI can amplify inequality. It can help us personalize, accelerate learning, but also lead students to outsource their thinking, to make learning more scripted. It can super empower teachers as the most imaginative designers of, innovative learning environment, or it can disempower them to become the slaves of scripted lesson plans. And again, we see both at the same time. It can help us, nuance human perspectives, help us think about the bigger picture, or entrench existing bias. It can connect people or rather insulate us from people. And, AI is always ethically neutral. That's a great thing, but it's surely in the hands of people who are not neutral. And that's where many of the issues arise from. First of all, looking at more generally at the use of AI, it varies hugely across countries. When we actually survey teachers to what extent they integrate AI into their practice, you can see in countries like the UAE or Singapore, it's becoming a kind of mainstream tool in almost anything teachers do. Whereas in a country like France or even, high-tech country Japan, is still very distant from educational practice. And this is not about a special need. This is about the general picture. So huge variability. And then when you ask teachers what they actually do with this, you can see, learning about summarize a topic. Obviously, this is where AI is good. That's what teachers are using it for. Generate lesson plans. But, special needs is not that high up on this list. So there's certainly a lot more room for the use of AI to better support students with special needs. And this is really what this working paper is about. If you look around the world, we have over 90 million children who live with some form of disability, and nearly half of them are actually not in school. And even when they are in school, the barriers they face, whether those barriers are academic, social, or systemic, they can, have lifelong consequences. But the good thing is, this is where AI can make a difference, from personalized learning platforms, speech recognition, assistive robotics. We have great tools that can support students in ways that, none of us here could have imagined even a decade ago. Obviously, if you're not careful, those tools can also deepen inequalities through bias, through exclusionary design, or simply poor implementation. You shouldn't forget that. So in this webinar, we're going to, show you insights from our paper, Leveraging AI to Support Students with Special Education Needs. And the focus today is how we can ensure that AI becomes a tool for both equity and efficiency, the inclusion aspect is really at the center here. There are now plenty of promising solutions that support students with special education needs. Think of, immersive digital learning environments, intelligent tutoring systems, assistive technologies, and they can help students to participate in mainstream education. And that in itself is an incredibly important goal, because we know for students with special needs, the benefits are obvious, but for students without special needs, there are also important benefits. Inclusive designs improve openness, tolerance, they can reduce prejudices that people may have, and they don't have adverse effects on academic outcomes. That's also interesting. There's no downside, but there are lots of upsides for all students. So in this paper, we looked at 12 AI tools for special education needs, and the focus is on student-facing AI tools and solutions for the compulsory aged students, that's primary and secondary schooling. And we look at tools around learning disabilities, at tools to counter physical impairments, and then mental health disorders. So I'm going to present you with an example for each of those three categories. And when we selected the examples, what was really important to us was that the tools are evidence-based. That's sometimes hard to do because this is just such a rapidly evolving field. But the very least we wanted to ensure is that when those tools are designed, there is a kind of evidence strand built into this. So at least those tools need to be actively studied. That was really important for us. And also that they support students with special needs, obviously. But lastly, also that they demonstrate inclusive design, such as using diverse data sets or involving students, teachers, and families in development. That was also a very important third criterion. So we only picked examples that meet all three kind of criteria. I don't have much time, so I'm going to showcase just one solution for each of those three categories. For learning disabilities, we have studied Detective by Change Dyslexia, which looks at diagnosing and helping students with dyslexia to develop literacy skills. And we have Kate with us here, a great expert in that field. This tool here that we studied has essentially three components. The Detective View test, which combines linguistic items with machine learning to diagnose people, and actually not just students, it goes from 7 to 70 years, and it comes out with 80% reliability. So it's pretty good at the diagnosis. But it also offers the detective application with over 40,000 game-based exercises, of which the type and difficulty can, adapt to individual students' strengths and weaknesses. That's really the power of AI. They have been developed by linguists, psychologists, computer scientists working together around, addressing these issues of dyslexia. For example, the image that you can see here is an exercise that targets phonological and lexical awareness. And then the third component is analytics that help to detect errors, and also natural language techniques that then generate the most appropriate linguistic resources to have students, move on. And when this was studied in a Spanish-speaking context, both the experimental and the control groups received professional language training, so there was no difference in that. But the experimental group then also used the Detective View games for 8 weeks. And then, they did a pre-design, and the results showed that children in the experimental group actually came out with significantly higher rates of improvement in 3 tasks related to literacy acquisition. So there's real evidence that actually this made a difference in the learning styles, all other things being equal. On the second category, the AI Institute for Exceptional Education and also the Institute of Education Science of the US Department of Education is developing evidence-based tools to facilitate universal speech and language screenings, but also to streamline intervention planning and tailor interventions then to the needs of different students very early on. And they offer 2 solutions here. One is an AI screener that's using speech data from children, and then AI compares it to samples that represent kind of developmental expectations that help parents decide, whether to seek a more comprehensive evaluation. So it's a first tool where parents can see, is my child sort of where it should be according to expected patterns, and then if not, you can look for more detailed solutions. But it also provides what they call an AI orchestrator, and that actually provides interventions for children that are identified as they're needing more specialized support, and that has a range of knowledge-based resources that based on age, disability, and needs. And then there's also an intervention recommender, and an AI augmented intervention system for materials in the classroom. And again, we have a panelist, Professor Xiong here, who's going to help us understand those kinds of tools more. But you can see, second example, also really interesting evidence-based solution with quite concrete results. And then third, a research team at the Interaction Lab at USC. Also, there were people from Yale, from Stanford, MIT involved, developed Kiwi. That's a green bird-like robot to support students with autism spectrum disorder. And that began already in 2012, an age quite long ago in this AI time, to create socially assistive robots that could be present in households for children, to sort of intermediate between therapy sessions and school. And I highlight this example because it's really interesting. ASD articulates itself across a lot of different ways, and it's really, really hard, for machine learning to get a handle on this. But this example has been really successful in this. And you have to also consider there's lots of data privacy issues involved. So the research team here developed a quite sophisticated method that used data from every child and then data from other children in the study. And the robot, I don't know what's happening on my screen. The robot then personalizes learning through AI-based reinforcement learning techniques that consider the kind of long-term learning goals. And as the students interact with it, the robot then adjusted the responses and the level of challenges, the feedback given to them. So quite nuanced environment in an area of special needs that's really, really hard for technology to deal with. So if you put it all together, there's lots of potential for AI to support students with special needs. First of all, AI-powered tools can obviously, adapt content. They can adapt to the pace of learning speed. They can also provide feedback, analytics to meet individual learning needs. And they can do that in real time. That's usually the hard part. When students sit in the classroom, you do not have that kind of real-time support. It's really difficult. And what's really central in all of this, it can do so without removing students from the mainstream education. So this is what the aspect of inclusion is about, that students can participate in the regular educational settings while getting the support that is adapted to their learning needs. That's really what makes these technologies unique and special. Second, it enhances accessibility by transforming learning materials into the required alternative formats. For example, you think of text to speech or sign language avatars, or simplifying language. All those kinds of things that are needed, you can do in real time. So students who have sensory difficulties or cognitive impairments can then participate in shared classroom activities in that inclusive design. And that's the important part. And third, the AI tools, such as speech recognition or voice synthesis, can enable students who have speech or mobility impairments to communicate and engage once again in immersive in-group settings. Fourth, socially assistive robots and AI agents can help neurodiverse students, particularly those with ASD, autism spectrum disorder, or ADHD, and practice interaction skills in inclusive environment that you could do in very difficult. It would be very difficult to do that in real-time settings without AI. And then you have AI dashboards and analytics and recommendation engines that can then help teachers to find out, what to do, generate insights, provide advice, monitor student progress, and also facilitate the kind of differentiated instruction that would be very, very difficult to do without segregating students, without AI. So quite a lot of potential. Now, as always, when you have something new, there are limitations. There's lots of issues that we need to overcome or mitigate to ensure that those tools are effective, that they are ethical, that they are environmentally responsible and secure implementation in education systems for all students, but again, especially for students with special education needs. But whenever we introduce something new, we have to encounter those kinds of things. So now that we have seen both the potential, but also some of the risks, let's look at what it would take to implement those tools effectively and also ethically in education systems. And there are a couple of points that are really important from our perspective. The first is something that you come across whenever you do something new, and that is co-design. Now, we find that AI tools are always most effective when they are, have the user perspective in mind, when they are created with the people who use them. That could be students with special needs, that could be teachers teaching students with special needs, that could be families, that could be specialists. Now, but ensuring that really those are at the table at the stage of design, not just the users of this. Now. And then second, professional learning is important, needs to be ongoing. I'm going to show you a chart in a moment which just shows how strongly connected this is to actual utilization. And then, strategic partnerships are important. They are the key driver of innovation. That's about public-private collaborations. It's about philanthropy that often fuels, inclusive AI development. But, it's the way to go, but it's also, of course, an issue of building synergies and effective coordination. There is, the issue around funding, and not just funding for the tools, but also to invest in the longer term R&D underpinning this. Now, that's often where we are shortchanging. We have lots of interesting applications, but understanding what works for whom, in what context, needs really, a systematic effort. And then, international collaboration. Now, open data sets, research findings that are shared, regulation and global networks. That's really what can facilitate the ethical and effective use of AI. And there are lots of things underway, but maybe not enough yet. This is just a chart that just shows you the relationship that I just mentioned. You can see on the vertical axis, the share of teachers who use AI at work, and on the horizontal axis, the share of teachers who engage in professional learning. You can actually see, where you have teachers who are not engaging in learning about AI, you're unlikely to see them using technologies, however many laptops you have in the classroom. So that aspect of continuous professional learning is really, really important in this. And I say that because it's not yet frequent in many systems. Now, so let me conclude with just a couple of policy considerations. First, AI tools must be built and used responsibly. Should go without saying, but it's not, and that means fairness in data sets, strong data protection, transparency about how those tools work, particularly the algorithms that underpin those tools, and, a commitment to sustainability and oversight, ensuring, that this is an ongoing systematic path. Second, to know whether those tools actually work and for whom, we need long-term independent research that looks beyond, short-term test performance. And again, I say that because it's not yet frequent. Third, good data practices are really important. Obviously, this is an area where it's particularly important to protect sensitive data. You need to keep students and teachers informed, and you need to ensure that data is used for learning and doesn't drive profit. And then last but not least, having common standards across systems and borders, something that we at the OECD always promote, so that AI tools meet ethical, education, and also environmental benchmarks. You'll find lots of more information in the underpinning papers, and I look forward to the panel discussion on this. Thank you, Duncan.
Thank you so much for that, Andreas. Obviously, loads of things we can discuss in this panel discussion. If you do have questions for the panelists or for Andreas, please do write them in. I can see that some questions have already come in. We will try to get through as many as possible. Just use the chat function at the bottom of your screens. Now, though, let's get the panel underway. Joining us today, Kate Griggs, founder and CEO of the global charity Made in Dyslexia, and also Professor Jinjin Zhong, director of the Institute of AI and Data Science, and the scientific director of the National AI Institute for Exceptional Education at the University at Buffalo in the United States. Thank you so much both for joining us. Let's get stuck in right away. Kate Griggs, why don't we start with you? Your organization supports learners with dyslexia. Have you seen AI tools which you think are particularly effective in that area?
Firstly, thank you for asking me to join you. It's great to be here. What a big topic we've got to cover today. I think we're going to have lots of questions and lots to cover. Um, there is so much that is being developed to support learners with dyslexia. I think what's very exciting, particularly for this group of young people and for their teachers, is that AI is helping us to do two things, and hopefully three things. Firstly, there are brilliant tools for intervention, so teachers can really work with AI to get the support that kids need to catch up in literacy and in numeracy and across the board. And there are great screeners that are in all sorts of the new AI materials that are coming out and programs. I think also it enables teachers to differentiate lessons for dyslexic learners so they can lean into their learning styles and strengths, which is absolutely amazing. And I think the third thing that we're hopefully going to see more of is really developing dyslexic learners' strengths. Dyslexic thinking is a valuable skill set. It's recognized as a skill on LinkedIn. Dyslexic thinking skills are creative thinking, complex problem solving, interpersonal skills. And the use of AI to really break down the barriers with literacy and lots of written information that dyslexics take time to go through. AI is removing that with ChatGPT and whatever else you want to use. So it is enabling dyslexics to have time to lean into their strengths. So I think there are three areas that are really going to make a difference for dyslexic learners. And there is so much being developed. I would say literally every week we're approached by somebody who's created something that can support dyslexic learners. But actually just there in the sort of realms that everybody uses, whether you're looking at Google Classroom or you're a Microsoft school or you're using ChatGPT, there is so much that teachers can access. So yes, a big, wonderful space to be explored.
Just a very quick follow-up for you, because you mentioned just the sheer number of apps and software and what have you coming out just for dyslexic students to help them. What would you recommend for a teacher or a parent or someone else to do to sort through all that and make a decision on what's best to use?
I think the first thing is look at what is in the tech systems that you're using in your school. So if you're a Google school, there are lots of things that you can use within Google that will support, and the same for Microsoft. And then I would suggest talk to colleagues. I mean, we as a charity, we tend not to promote products because we like to be impartial. But I think talk to colleagues. There are lots and lots of forums online with dyslexia specialist teachers who will tell you what they're tapping into. But it is an area we're looking into because there is so much, and there's also so much for free actually that teachers can be using. There's a lot you don't need to pay for, but a lot of things that are being sold. So it is an area we're looking at to try and recommend certain things.
Thank you so much for that, Kate. Let's bring in Professor Jinjin Zhong, because Andreas mentioned how your team have created the AI screener and orchestrator, forgive me, to support students with special education needs. Can you give us some details about how these work?
Sure. First, again, thank you so much for having me here. And also thank you, Andreas, for highlighting our work. And so of course, there's many different aspects of using technology to helping children with special education needs. And in our AI Institute, we focus on two types of solutions. And for example, like the AI screener, as Andrea mentioned, right? And also he highlighted about the evidence-based approach. And the screening means, okay, we want to develop something and that can enable like parents or relatives who are not professionally trained, yet still able to pick up the early signs of children who may need the special education services. And if we can deploy AI in the most natural setting, for example, in the classroom, right, and pick up the children's interactions with other children, children's interaction with the teachers, and based on the current standard acceptable practices, for example, the professionals, how they do the screening test. And we kind of replicate the same practices, called evidence-based practices, but they use AI to automate it. And then we can generate the evidence-supported report, right? And they're showing this report to the parent or the teachers, let them to decide, hey, based on this evidence, what do you think of the children's performance and the speech language capabilities? Maybe you should take this particular child to see the further assessment. So that's kind of our intention to develop this solution. It will be easy to use. And also we say, hey, let's make technology accessible. So enable the screening universally available for everyone. So that's how we designing the solution to the AI screener. And I can talk about more later about specific examples. The other aspect is about the intervention. And we focus on helping the speech language pathologist, called SLP in the US, right? And because of what we see, no matter what kind of a special education need or what type of disabilities, there's a common need across many of them. And the common need is the speech language support. And in the US, the number of speech language pathologists is just not enough. And so they are always overworked, a lot of caseloads, and which means sometimes they are overworked, yet still not able to provide individualized, customized services for individual children. And so now can we use the technology to make SLP's job, right, easy to do and make them to be more effective and also help them to identify more evidence-based practices. And so they can focus on interacting with children and do the job they enjoy doing and leave some of the mundane work, for example, documentation, right? And for example, to write the report and doing this, reading a lot of the literatures and try to find the right practices. Let AI do all of this work for you. So we want to enable SLPs to be more effective and scale their time so to help more children.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Let's bring back in Andreas Schleicher from the OECD. Andreas, from the OECD's perspective, how ready do you think education systems are to use AI in this area? Do schools need or teachers need training programs? Do they need more support, or is everyone in it on their own, having to carry out their own research, and we just see where people land?
I think even without AI, many teachers do face difficulties. If you actually survey, and we survey teachers around the world, what are they feeling comfortable with and where they feel challenged? And what you can see consistently is that dealing with students with special education needs, working with students from multicultural settings, those turn out to be usually the biggest challenges that teachers face. We also have an increasing number of students that are identified as having special needs. That doesn't necessarily mean there are more students with special needs, but it clearly means that society expects teachers to be better in inclusion. And teachers face great difficulties. Now you have a compounding challenge. That's the use and integration of AI. I showed you some statistics. In some countries, AI has become a kind of mainstream tool. In others, is still pretty far away from the reality of teachers in classrooms and schools. So I think these two compounding challenges go together. But I actually think Professor Xiong has made a really important point. There is probably not going to be truly inclusive education without AI. Because at the moment, a lot of things that are sold as inclusive education is just you put, students with all kinds of needs into a classroom and you say this inclusive. That's not going to deal with the different needs of students. AI is probably the one opportunity that we have to truly understand how different students learn and then to adapt the learning environments to their different needs. That doesn't mean that, AI automatically leads to inclusion. Certainly not. It can also, amplify inequalities. But I do think it's a very significant promise to make real headway in this. But, our statistics show that, it's still far from the reality of teachers, and and more generally, I think teachers often are not well prepared. We are still have, the mindset is often still about teaching a uniform classroom. Now, that's what teachers get prepared for. They have, one kind of lesson plan, one kind of structure. And the idea that is now society's expectation to understand and engage with how different students learn differently is a kind of really big demand. But I think we have now the tools to address it. And I like the point that Kate made on this. We should not talk about disabilities necessarily. I think this strengths-based narrative that we can create around some of those, looking at, she called it, dyslexic thinking skills. I really like that. What is the asset that students with certain disabilities actually bring into the field? How can we leverage those assets, bring them out so that those students become really active contributors in mainstream settings? That's the aspiration. But, again, you survey teachers, it's hard for them, and then the technology is still also quite far away. This double challenge is one that I think public policy needs to address. What makes me confident? You look at the data and you can see some countries are so much more advanced than others in this, which really shows that can be done.
Thank you so much for that, Andreas. Kate Griggs, I'm going to come to you. It's almost ironic. We're talking about cutting edge technology, and the studio camera has decided to break halfway through this webinar. So, bravo, OECD. We can't even get a camera to work. But these AI tools can miraculously do huge things, apparently, to support students with special education needs. Kate Griggs, help me out while I try to fix this camera, if you could. So keep your answer relatively long. How do the AI tools you've seen compare to traditional support methods for students with dyslexia? How do they compare?
I think the main thing that it does for teachers is that it enables a teacher to be able to truly differentiate a lesson. It also enables a teacher to really understand where a child is. It's quite easy for dyslexic students to mask where they are, to cover up what they actually know and don't know. So I think and it can be an embarrassing. It can be embarrassing for some dyslexic kids to really put themselves out there. So when you've got the kind of privacy of doing it yourself with a computer, I think it will certainly enable them to get a better understanding of all of their students. And the kids that will have gone under the radar, it will enable them to pick those up as well. So I think the difficulty we have is that teachers will need to change from a traditional model into something that is relying on technology. And sometimes when you're not confident teaching a child with special educational needs anyway, that can seem like the next level of scary, if you like. But it's really important that we understand the possibilities that it does have. And that's just going to be a process of it being, as Andreas said, of systems really recognizing it and welcoming it and it being implemented. Is that a long enough answer for you, or should I talk about something else?
It was a lovely answer, Kate. Unfortunately, this camera is still not working. Jinjin Young, please, your reaction to what Kate just said there.
Right. I think there's a lot of possibilities. Okay. And maybe I can share a few specific examples, right? As I mentioned early, maybe, for example, take the screening as example. And right now in the market, there's many kind of instruments for the screening. And some of them, right, is marketing. We do not know if they are really evidence-based or not. And even though some of them are evidence-based, but it costs a lot of money for parents to get those instruments. And so even we want to use AI to help, but we don't have the copyright. So now we end up with, you say, hey, what should we do, right? So we are taking an approach to work with academia, because we have spent a lot of money in the US, right, to fund the research, to do all kinds of research related to the special education. But a lot of those research end up in just publications on the shelf. So now we try to sift through all of those publications, find, okay, what are the evidence-based research, right? And we can use AI to automate and deploy it. And one of the work we kind of found is developed by Professor Sean Redman from University of Utah. And he developed an evidence-based screening method and called a sentence recall test. And he has used a lot of the NIH money to do all the experiments, all the randomized trials, and it's proven evidence-based screening. But his approach is very manual and takes time, right? So it's not scalable. So now we started working with him, partner with him, and he's sharing his methodology and allowing us to work with him with his data and to test our AI technology. So now we developed this screening tool we call the Auto RSR. So now we made it free and open source, right? Online. So now we are working with our local school district and to try to deploy this ones in the local school district. So now parents, or they don't have to go to the clinician to do the screening test anymore. They can just go to the online, use our tools to do the screening. They can see the report and they can decide, if this is based on the screening results and what actions they want to take. And so hopefully more and more people can work with us, right? With their research results, and we can use AI to automate it and make it available and to anyone. So this is one of the solutions.
Good. No, I think we have a really important discussion here, and I think also can learn from some very specific applications. And I think, of course, on the one hand, we have the work that you're doing at the frontier of this. At the same time, we have, the reality in classrooms and schools. And I think bridging that gap, I think, will be very important. And the question, I think, remains, how do we build capacity for the use and meaningful application in every classroom? I mean, this is the big promise, but how do we make it a reality? And I wonder, Kate, your experience with this, dyslexic thinking, do you see this getting traction in mainstream classrooms? What's your take on that? How do we bridge that capacity gap?
I think there are some absolutely amazing examples of where schools are embracing kids who are thinking differently and really embracing technology. And then there are some other examples where we're still very stuck with the traditional rote learning. But I think things are definitely changing. There is definitely a move within education now where well, I think you're probably at the cutting edge of this, Andreas, with the OECD. There is a need to transform education from the traditional rote learning. And I do think we are seeing people wanting to drive that and buck the system and do things differently. And there are some wonderful examples around the world of that happening. So I think I genuinely think that the change will come. And I think AI is going to be absolutely pivotal in that change, because at the moment, a lot of the things we're asking young people to do within exams, for instance, AI can do better than humans now. So there is a need to be using AI to develop critical thinking, to develop emotional intelligence, and all of those skills alongside AI to be able to really prepare young people for the future. And I know that there is a big drive from industry now to say we're not actually testing the right and preparing our young people for the future. And there is also, we've just released a new report actually that looks at the economic value of dyslexic thinking to the world. And it's a staggering $4.6 trillion for the type of thinking that dyslexics have. So I think that AI has the opportunity to move special educational needs out of that special educational needs bucket and make it a mainstream, different way of thinking that we need to be embracing in all our learners.
Yeah, I thank you, Kate. I think you make a point that is also really very close to our heart at the OECD. I mean, we live in a world where we need every talent, and we need to understand, different people have different talents, think in different ways. And I think if we can bring out all of that, and AI can help us actually first understand, what are the extraordinary skills and abilities of ordinary people, and how can we actually leverage them in educational settings in life. I think we can make a real difference. If you think, Professor Young, about the kind of potential that we are losing every day because many people who have great talents cannot bring them to bear because of different limitations, how do you explain that the investment in this area is still so limited? I mean, you are an example of someone who's investing their life in this, but you look at then in quantitative terms, that kind of investment in that end of inclusion and frontier research is still very, very limited. And you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the investment in terms of the amount of investment will never be enough, right? Because there's just so many things demanding the resources. I think what we probably should pivot to is how do we do something more meaningful with the limited resources? And actually, from my background, I used to work for IBM research, right, in the industry. And I find in order to do something more meaningful in terms of to develop technology for the public good, not for profit, and people need to think more creatively how to leverage the limited resources. And working with academia is one of the solutions. That's why I came back to academic world. And the reason being, right, and we are in the business of training our future generation of talents. And those young minds, they are creative. They are hungry for learning new things. They want to help the world to solve some of the biggest challenge. And that's why they go to the higher education, right, to do more. And as a professor, think of how can we tap into this tremendous pool of resources and the talents and do something meaningful. If we can infuse the right challenges, right problems to them, and guide them right through this educational journey and solving the challenges, the societal needs, and also make our solutions available for everyone. So I think that is a way to maybe address this limited resource issues, and that's what things I'm passionate about, in the academic world. And let's do this kind of things together. I coined a term many years ago. It's called earthly AI. So our AI research, AI solution is not flashy, right? And we are down to the earth, and make sure that our research can make a difference. And the really the test is you develop something, anyone use it or not, and can really help people or not about the publication papers, right? And so anyway, this is kind of a different, probably different aspect to answer this question. Yes, I don't have a better way to get you more resources, and there's a lot of politicals, a lot of the fights, right? But what can we do with the boundary, with these constraints?
Thank you, Jinjin, and thank you, Andreas. Apologies to everyone for the sound and technical difficulties with my camera and microphone. The camera is broken and the microphone is now in the bin. Apologies for the feedback. But here we are, and I'm back. So unfortunately, sorry, Andreas, I'm stealing the moderating reins, but there's loads of questions which have come in from the chat. I'm going to try and zip through as many as possible. Kate Griggs, maybe not for you, this best question, actually. Maybe Andreas. Gerald from the Center of Excellence in Universal Design asks, how are risks mitigated regarding the sharing of personal information in this area?
I think this is one of the most widely debated kind of issues. I must say, I think we sort of put a lot of emphasis on this when we deal with AI solutions. We're actually ignoring those kinds of risks in very classical educational settings. When people chat about you, when your teachers talk, I mean, there's a lot of issues with personal information in education. I do think we need to get the balance right. We have that risk to keep privacy, but also we have huge benefits. And it can't be that when you get into school, you have to switch off anything because there is a kind of remote likelihood of a confidentiality breach. And then, students go home and then, the world is open to them and they engage in all sorts of AI-based solutions. I think we probably need to rethink our approach to privacy and data protection in this AI age. What we have developed for the past, I don't think is going to get us where we need to be. I think we may, create so many barriers for the effective use of AI for helping students with special needs that we will not, get there right. But, I think maybe Kate and Professor Xiong have other perspectives on that.
Yeah, Kate Griggs, if I can bring you in, because there are lots of questions on this, and Chris Obi, for example, writing in and saying what safeguards are needed to protect the rights and privacy of students with special education needs in AI systems. What do you think? What safeguards are needed?
It's such a big topic, isn't it? I think, I mean, there's a lot of technology and support in systems that schools are already using. Like if Microsoft, for instance, they have amazing things like Learning Coach. I presume Microsoft will have, as would Google, lots and lots of security and those things covered. So, I mean, honestly, that's not really my bag, but I fear that if we're constantly putting barriers in the way, we may not actually embrace the possibilities that are there. So like in all things in life, it's finding that balance of being able to move forward, but at the same time, making sure we're protecting our kids.
What's your view,
A
Jingjing?
little bit, and let me jump in here a little bit. Okay, I can provide a different perspective, right? But similar to what Kate mentioned. So the way we are taking is called is a human-centered AI design approach. A lot of times, yes, there's a lot of the concerns about the privacy, but we need to also work with the user to understand what are the real concerns, right? Sometimes some of this generalized privacy concerns may not be valid. Some of the things actually people are willing to share. People are willing to help to contribute their data, so-called personal data. If you can demonstrate you are developing technology can really benefit them, right? So that's why we take a human-centered approach, make sure understand what are the things acceptable to the end users, what are not acceptable, right? That is kind of so make sure we tailor the need to the users. And of course, from technology point of view, we should also take responsibilities to make sure we develop technologies and protect the data, right, as much as we can. So which means this is for example, some of the edge AI solution, how do we develop the solution at its edge so the user has more control of the data? If we need to ship data to the cloud, right? And how do we put encryptions? So there's a homomorphic computation, and so you can still encrypt the data, but yet you still can do the computation. And now this goes through, now you have the performance issues, more computation latency. That's where the technology can help. That's why continued investment into the technology development is important to develop the right technology to protect the data privacy issues. And of course, education, right? And make sure that the people who develop technology really have this ethical issues in mind, right? Make sure when you develop technology, did you really think about protection of the data, right? And put the user's need in mind, not only for profit.
Okay, thanks so much for that. Related to what you were just saying, Jinjin, a question has come in from James Michael Walker, which I think I'll direct towards Andreas. Andreas Schleicher, James Michael Walker asks, how many schools currently are equipped with experts in cybersecurity in order to protect our children? Now, I'm not expecting an exact answer, but do many schools have cybersecurity experts?
We don't have data on that, honestly. And I think the issue that we currently have is that school leaders are often facing the responsibility for cybersecurity, but do not have neither the people nor the expertise to deal with those issues. So there is a big discrepancy that the obligations on resting on schools are very high, but capacity to deal with is quite limited. And again, to have a good regulatory environment that reconciles, the need for free flows of data with data privacy, I think there is certainly a lot of work to be done to ensure that we get that balance right and that we do not require every school to have cybersecurity experts. That's just not a realistic goal, nor can we ask school principals to be responsible for things they can't really, manage. So I think the systems in it themselves need to have, a good, manage those kinds of trade-offs.
Thank you so much for that, Andreas. If we could look towards the future for a moment before this webinar comes to an end, we've only got 10 minutes left or so. Kate Griggs, if I can bring you back in, what do you think the potential is for AI tools in the future in regards to dyslexic students? You see where it is at the moment, but I don't know if you've ever spoken to developers. What are they hoping for the future in 10 to 20 years' time? Are you thinking there's going to be even bigger jumps forward?
I think 10 to 20 years time is unimaginable, to be honest with you. I mean, we had a call last week from Meta, who are using their glasses and all sorts of their wearable technology to look at how they support dyslexic thinkers and dyslexics and wanted some support on that. I mean, it is if you think about where we've come in 5 years, where we'll be in the next 5 years is just incredibly exciting. And I think that's why it's important that we make sure that we embrace this technology and are not frightened of it, but obviously we do need the guardrails. And I think it's the most important thing in AI as the world moves forward, and we're seeing it in the workplace. It's about co-intelligence. It's about having humans and machines working alongside. And that's exactly the same in education. It would be frightening if you were to put a dyslexic child just working with computers or working with technology and without having that human element alongside them to support them. So I think it's that amazing partnership that humans and AI will develop over the coming years that I think is so exciting.
Thank you for that. Professor Jinjin Zhong, if I could bring you back in again, do you think ed tech companies genuinely care about helping students, all students, but especially as we're talking about students with special education needs? Do they genuinely care, or are they more concerned about gaining users, making their apps and so on as addictive as possible, which might boost motivation to learn, but in terms of outcomes, do they really care about the learning outcomes, or they're more interested in their bottom line in terms of making some cash?
This is a very good question. And I don't want to generalize, but I would say in principle, yes. And for a couple of reasons. The first one, and they want, the reason they chose this business is because they want to help the children, right? That's why, because they have other business, they can probably make even more profit, but they chose this particular business. So yes, they want to have the children's interest in mind, for sure. And the second, for running any business, in order for you to be successful, and you have to make sure your end users feel like you are helping them. And that's the true greater leaders, business leaders, right? So for their own benefit, they should, with the children's interest in mind, so develop technology to help them. So in this case, I would say yes. And also from my own personal experience, I've been working with some of the ad tech leaders and the thought leaders, and have a wonderful interaction with them. And they are genuinely wants to find the right technology to improve their product and make sure their product can be used more effectively. So, and for all of this, I would say yes.
Thank you so much. Another question here from Floriana from Germany, who says, how can we help schools understand the best use for artificial intelligence for kids with special education needs? Andreas Schleicher, what is the best way to help schools understand the best use of these new technologies?
Engaging educators in the design of those tools. And students, I think that's really that inclusive design is your best guarantee that people will become, the best promoters and advocates of those tools. If you just assume, you parachute a new tool into a classroom, very little is going to change. And I think the answer really comes from, making the people part of the design. And there are great examples for that, where you have, professional learning community of teachers actually doing the part of the research that we're talking about here, testing some of those applications, providing that feedback. This is an evolving field. There's not going to be the perfect solution. So I think the more we can actually build capacity on the ground, I think the more we're going to see effective users in that.
Yeah, Griggs, you mentioned Meta coming in and showing off some of their tech. Is that so that you're giving your input and to ensure that it is inclusive, this new technology for everyone?
Yeah, I think there is a real eagerness within all of the big tech companies to make sure that they are actually approaching well, for us, it's dyslexic people. So we're constantly asked to put together a group of dyslexic people and teachers too that can test the product. So I think there is a demand and a desire to do that, which is very, very encouraging. But yeah, it's unbelievable how fast this is moving. It really is quite extraordinary. So I think it's just important that we recognize it as such an amazing opportunity for teachers and for learners, and find a way to embrace it with all the understandable fears that everybody has as well. It is a huge opportunity.
Thank you for that, Kate. Okay, we are close to the end of our time, unfortunately, for this webinar. I want to thank everyone for sending in questions. Unfortunately, as usual, we haven't had time to go through them. I'm going to blame the technical difficulties this time for not being able to get through as many questions as we might have hoped for. Before we do go, though, let's get a last final thought from all of our panelists. Why don't we start with Professor Jinjun Zhong. Professor, if you had to prioritize just one thing, what's the one essential action that you think needs to happen to ensure that AI serves all learners, in particular students with special education needs?
Yes. So we here at the National AI Institute for Special Education, we want to be the nexus point for anyone who wants to help the children with disabilities using technology, using AI. Right? And I see there's a lot of good questions and a lot of interesting comments about the usage in terms of, hey, how to use AI to support the emotional intelligence, and how about for people with hearing challenges. There's so many good use cases. What I would like to ask everyone's help, right? If you have a good use cases, please reach out. We want to understand your use cases, right? And also help us to develop our technology. And right now we have technology. And one of the challenges I'm having right now is not about the technology itself. It's about with people. How do I test my technology? How do I know it works? I need people to work with me to test it. But in order for me to get those people, right now I'm having a hard time to reach those people who can sign up, willing to test the technology, right? If you really think technology can help you, or you want technology to help you, please also work with us to test our technology, give us a feedback. So that's kind of my really the thought. Okay, please reach out, right? And also use volunteer your time and to test out our technology. Give us the feedback so we can continue to improve to help you as well.
And you'll be able to find Jinjun Zhong at the University of Buffalo in the United States. So get Googling. I'm sure you'll be able to find him on LinkedIn or something else. Kate Griggs from the charity Made in Dyslexia, a final word from you. What do you think most needs to be prioritized? If there's one thing you'd like to see changed right now, whether it's researchers, developers, policymakers in this area, what do you think it should be?
I think the biggest potential that AI has for the world actually, and education at large, is to change the way that we view intelligence. We're measuring and treasuring the wrong things in education for the future. And I think the more we can embrace the fact that AI is transforming the type of smart we need in the world, and the more we can help AI and this education transformation to happen in the way that we're measuring and treasuring our kids, I think the better. I think it's got huge potential and a really big societal impact to make the change that we need to do within our education systems globally.
Thank you, Kate. And the final word goes to the OECD's Director for Education and Skills, Andreas Schleicher.
I think we should never forget that education is not a transactional business, but a human, a relational experience, an enterprise. And I hope that AI will help us actually to bring out, what makes us, humans, and not dehumanize us. And I think this is the potential is there. The risks are there as well. And I hope, that we will navigate this to ensure that everyone with whatever talent they bring can actually play out what their capacities in this world. And I think actually AI can, help us make that happen.
Thank you so much, Andreas. And sadly, that is all we have time for. Thank you so much to our panelists today. Thank you to Kate Griggs from the charity Made in Dyslexia, and from Professor Jinjun Zhong from the University at Buffalo, and of course, Andreas Schleicher right here at the OECD. If you want to learn more about the things which we have been discussing, then do check out the new OECD work paper on this. It's called Leveraging Artificial Intelligence to Support Students with Special Education Needs. You'll find it on the OECD website. Thank you so much to all of you for sending in your questions and comments. We really do appreciate it. And thank you to the team working behind the scenes to make sure that this webinar runs smoothly. We didn't do too bad. That's it for now, though. See you soon for another OECD webinar. All the best.